Worst deaths in human history. Chat, one more.
Here
Chat,
are 5 of the
you can't
worst
lie,
deaths
this
in
sounds
human
cool.
history. The last one is some serious Saw type
Chat.
stuff. Number 5, boiled alive. Ishikawa Goemon
Yeah,
was an
Oden
outlaw
chat,
who lived in the
Oden
late 1500s in feudal Japan, who rose to fame stealing from the rich and sharing his spoils with the poor.
Keish, I've already
in modern
replied.
times, he's become somewhat of a folk hero, being portrayed in anime, movies, and video games.
Chat, isn't
so
he Oden
it's
from
a
One
little
Piece?
hard to tell what details about his life were real and what was made up. Some say he was originally a samurai, while others say he was actually a ninja. And while historians disagree on a lot of things, there's one thing they all agree on.
The way he
His
was killed.
Public execution, where he was boiled alive, was extremely cool
Yeah, chat,
and
he was
unusual.
boiled in
But
oil.
First, let's get into how he ended up
Yeah,
in
chat,
that
that's what she
situation.
Oden from One Piece.
Goemon lived in a Japan ruled by Hideyoshi Toyotomi, a powerful warlord called a daimyo, who would become known as one of the 3 great unifiers of Japan.
Yeah.
Uniting a country of samurais and ninjas is a bloody business with a lot of collateral
Nah,
damage.
chat.
And one
Bro
story
got
goes
boiled
that
in
Goemon's
oil and he,
wife
like,
was
held his
alive
family
in one
up
of
or some
Toyotomi's
shit.
conquests, which made him hungry for revenge.
I forgot he did some
Another
crazy
story
shit.
says he just hated Toyotomi because he thought he was a dick and an unfair ruler. But whatever the reason, Goemon decided to assassinate the daimyo. On a warm summer night in 1594,
Yeah, I've heard that before,
Goemon
Swifters.
snuck into Fushimi Castle, Toyotomi's newly constructed retirement palace, and made it all the way to the daimyo's sleeping quarters. As he slowly crept his way toward Toyotomi, he knocked over a bell that alerted guards, leading to his capture. As we'll see in this
So
video,
bro was a shit
attempted
ninja.
assassinations of leaders usually do not end well for the would-be assassin, and instead of getting the standard samurai head chop execution, Goemon was instead sentenced to death by boiling. Which already seems cruel enough, but as further punishment, Goemon's young son was also sentenced to be boiled with him.
Yeah, chat.
On the day of his execution, a
His
crowd
son!
gathered in front of the Nanzenji
Bruh.
temple in Kyoto. Goemon and his son were placed into a large iron cauldron. It was filled with water and a fire was lit to
Oh,
begin
so it
the
was water, it
execution.
wasn't oil.
As the water
Okay.
began to boil, Goemon desperately lifted his small child above his head in an attempt to save him. From here, there are 2 versions of what happened next,
Okay, chat.
and I'll let you choose which one you want to believe.
I,
The first, as Goemon was struggling to keep his son out of the boiling water, onlookers, not being able to stand the sight, rushed in to rescue the boy, leading to a somewhat happy ending, as Goemon passed away seeing his son rescued and in safe hands. The second
Okay.
account is far more horrific. As Goemon painfully held his crying son above his head, he looked out at the crowd and realized that no one was coming to help them, and despite his best efforts, his son would ultimately perish that day as well. Upon this dreaded realization, Goemon plunged his child into the boiling water, unaliving him as quickly as possible, and then held his steaming body above his head again as a giant middle finger to Toyotomi and all the onlookers who
Chat.
did nothing.
knowing Japan back then, probably number 2. Chat, knowing how Japan was, number 2.
Stared out at the crowd until
He probably
eventually
had to kill his
passed away,
son.
slumping into
Yeah.
the boiling pot of
Chat,
outlaw soup.
I think yeah.
Yeah. Did I mention that it only gets worse from here? Number 4, mutilation parade. Juan
Chat,
de
knowing
Cañamares
Japan
was a
back then,
Catalan
chat, definitely
peasant
number
who
2.
in 1492 committed the biggest of no-nos, trying to assassinate King Ferdinand II of Aragon. And boy, did he pay for it.
Chat, is this the original plot to World War One? Killed a guy called Ferdinand? Shit, it's cooked.
But first, some backstory. In the late 1400s, the serfs in Catalonia rebelled against their king, demanding their freedom in what's
But
known
why
as
they
the
always
War of
beefing, bro?
Remences. A serf, for people who have never heard the term, was kind of like a slave that couldn't be bought or sold, and was instead assigned to work a plot of land no matter who owned it. The serfs, or remensa as they were known at the time, actually won the first war of remenses after a decade of fighting.
Why do all the leaders
Only
always
for
look
nothing to
autistic?
really change, leading to a second war of remenses, which ultimately got them the reforms they were looking for from King Ferdinand II. Kind of. They had to buy their freedom with a huge sum of money, but I guess at least that was an option.
Yeah, the king.
Anyways, in October of 1492, King Ferdinand and his wife Isabella, thinking everything was now cool with the serfs in Catalonia,
Why is it?
traveled to
By the way,
Barcelona
chat,
to
both of
conduct some
these
official
have
business.
both been
Things were
assassination
fine for a
attempts.
month, and the king conducted his
Both
affairs
like
from the
worst
royal
murders have been
palace.
assassination attempts
However,
so far.
all this changed on December 7th, 1492. As
Is
King
there- is there-
Ferdinand
is
was
there
leaving
a-
the palace,
a
Juan de
coincidence?
Cañamares made his way through the crowd with a small sword hidden in his cape. De Cañamares snuck up behind the king and out of nowhere violently cut him from his ear to his back. Immediately, a few of the king's men jumped on De
God.
Cañamares and stabbed him 3 times before the king, nearly passing out from his injury, commanded them to stop and keep him alive for questioning. See, the queen suspected that this assassination attempt was a plan the serfs and the entire city of Barcelona was in on.
Oh, this is
Which immediately got
Barcelona!
people around the Cañamares to be like, nah, he crazy. He was totally on his own. F that guy. Nobody wanted to be sentenced to the punishment this guy was about to get.
How bad can
In
it
the
be?
torture/interrogation that followed, the Cañamares confessed that he heard the devil's voice every day telling him to unalive the king, and if he did that, then he would become the new king. This let everyone else in the town off the hook, which I'm sure was a huge relief. For his punishment, the Cañamares was stripped naked, tied to a pole on a cart, and wheeled around town.
Bruh, that's
You may be
fucked.
thinking,
Chat, your
that
meat out
seems
like that,
fun,
that's
a parade
crazy.
around the city. A little embarrassing, I guess, being naked and all. But oh no, we're again talking about the punishment for a royal assassination attempt here.
Why is it an
It gets
assassination
much
attempt?
worse. At each stop around the town, the executioner brutally removed a part of the Cañamares' body.
That's cooked.
An official account of the execution translated from Spanish goes like this. First, they cut off the hand with which he hit the king, and then with burning iron tongs they took out one of his breasts, and then they took out one of his eyes,
One of his
and then they
breasts.
cut off his other hand, and then they took out the other eye, and then the other. The blacksmiths cut off the breast, and then the nose, and the whole body with tongs, and cut off the feet, and after all the limbs were cut off, they took out the heart through the back. One source said he died after the second stop, but they kept going anyway until the end of the wagon ride where he was stoned, and what was left of his body was
Chat,
burned
did they not
at a
take off his
stake.
meat?
Things
I'm
like this
surprised they
make
didn't
me
take off
wonder
his
why
meat
some
first.
people think time travel would be a fun idea. Number 3, molten gold.
Molten
Valerian was a
gold.
Roman emperor who ruled from 253 AD
Are we?
to
What the fuck?
260
I've
AD.
never heard of
A
this.
title that's usually pretty sweet. Power, prestige, the whole empire at your feet. But as we all know, with great power comes great opportunities to mess up spectacularly. And Valerian's mistake led to him suffering one of the worst
never heard of
deaths
this
an
one.
emperor could
Chai, have y'all heard of
ever
this one?
imagine. During Valerian's reign, the Persians, led by King Shapur I,
Oh,
began
Chat, I
attacking
knew him.
Roman
Yeah,
territory.
he was kind of cold.
Deciding he had had enough, Valerian personally led his army into battle against the Persian army of King
He got
Shapur.
cooked. I could just tell.
Valerian thought he could march in, flash some swords, and be home in time for a nice goblet of wine. But surprise, surprise, the Persians were a little tougher than expected.
Yeah, chat.
In
Persians
the
were
Battle
like
of
tough,
Edessa,
bro.
the Persians decisively defeated Valerian's army, and he and his men were taken prisoner. As a captive, Valerian got the VIP treatment. Very intense punishment.
Damn.
Shapur really got off on the
Chat,
fact
one of
that
these
the
almost,
Emperor
yeah.
of Rome was now his prisoner and subjected Valerian to the most humiliating punishments. He used Valerian as his personal footstool. Every time Shapur wanted to ride his horse, he would make Valerian get on all fours and step on him to get on
That's
his
not
horse.
that bad, Chad.
Talk
This
about
isn't
a
that
career
bad.
downgrade. But the humiliation didn't stop there. Valerian was also paraded around like a trophy, a living example of Persian dominance. Here's where it gets really,
That's not that
really
bad.
not fun for Valerian. There are some differing stories on how Shapur really offed him, but the most popular story is that Valerian tried to bribe Shapur for his release by offering a mountain of gold. This gave Shapur a great idea, and he forced Valerian to swallow molten gold as punishment, which ultimately did him in.
Holy shit.
The second way people think he may have died was that Shapur had him skinned alive. Also terrible, but whatever version you want to believe, after Valerian was dead, Shapur had his skin stuffed and displayed him as a trophy animal that he would show off to guests. From ruler
Hey guys,
of one of the
here's
most
the old king
powerful
of fucking
empires
Rome.
in the world
Yeah, he's just
to
chilling,
being
bro.
a janky scarecrow. Valerian's story is one for your nightmares. Number 2, roasted eggplant. Okay, for this
What the
next one,
fuck?
I originally was going to talk about someone else, but it turns out William Wallace, you know, the guy Mel Gibson made the movie Braveheart about in the 1990s,
He got his meat burned off.
died the exact same brutal way. Which makes me think the English really did not mess around with executions in the 1300s. This death is absolutely horrific, and so much worse than the one shown at the end of the movie. For those of you who didn't watch the wildly entertaining
chat, I've not
but
seen that film.
historically inaccurate movie Braveheart, William Wallace was a Scottish knight who was a central figure in the First Scottish War for Independence in the late 13th and early 14th century. He led the Scots in many battles against the English, most notably in the Battle of Stirling Bridge, where he
No, I
led
heard
a
this,
small
I can't
army
cap.
to a decisive victory over a much larger English force. By the early 1300s, he was declared a traitor to the English crown, which he argued didn't make sense because he never pledged his loyalty to the English king. But the king was like, roasted eggplant says what? What? Exactly. In August of 1305,
Bro,
he was
guys-
ultimately captured and sentenced to death in a way that would be considered barbaric in today's modern society.
Chat, all of these
On
are
August
considered
23rd,
barbaric,
1305,
bro.
Wallace was stripped naked and dragged through the city of London at the heels of a horse until they reached the elms at Smithfield. He was then strangled by hanging, but released, gasping for air just as he was passing out. Then, I'm not making this up, his eggplant was cut off and thrown into a fire right in front of his eyes.
Oh my fucking God.
He was then gutted, while again still alive, and made to watch his entrails be thrown into the fire. Finally, he was beheaded, and his body was chopped into 4 pieces and sent throughout the kingdom to be displayed as a warning. His head was dipped in tar and placed on a spike on London Bridge. Needless to say, he was not yelling, "Freedom!"
That is some Game of
like in
Thrones
the
shit,
movie.
to be fair.
And like I said earlier, there was another guy who was executed in the exact same way with the roasted eggplant and everything.
See, I thought they would have set it on
Middle
fire
Ages were
whilst
rough.
he's alive.
Number 1, Iron Throne. This one is some literal Saw movie type stuff. So click
Okay,
away
now
if you're
this
not
one,
into that.
bro, if it's number 1,
Georgi
I'm
Doja
interested.
was a decorated Hungarian soldier who led a massive
Hungarian.
peasant revolt in
Ops.
1514. What initially began as the recruitment of a peasant army for a crusade against the Ottoman Empire quickly turned into an all-out revolution when these peasants collectively realized how crappy they were all being treated and changed the target of the crusade to their landlords and nobles. Talk about an Uno reverse. Doja, being sympathetic to these common folk, found himself leading this
Damn,
army
so
in
bro
what was
became
later
the-
known
wait,
as
the leader
Doja's
died?
Rebellion.
Doja's
Armed with
Rebellion,
limited
yeah.
weapons, but fueled by rage, the army of peasants began burning towns, slaughtering landlords, and taking over castles and forts. Everything was all going great with this new crusade, until, well, it wasn't.
Line
The
of
tide
backwards,
turned
pause.
when the nobles decided
Pause.
they didn't really like this new crusade.
Pause.
Led by a powerful Hungarian noble, John Zapolya, the nobles crushed Doja's forces in a decisive battle.
Yeah, because they have like
Doja
trading
was
and shit,
captured,
money and equipment.
Unfortunately, Zapolya was not in a forgiving mood. He wanted to make an example out of Doja, and he came up with a punishment so gruesome it makes the other stuff on our list look like a spa day. Doja was made to sit on a throne. That doesn't seem that
Yeah, it
bad.
doesn't seem that bad.
Oh, this throne was made of burning hot iron. As Doja painfully sat cooking on his new throne,
Oh
a
my
red-hot iron crown was placed on his
Oh
head,
my God.
and a similarly heated scepter was placed in his hand to mock his
Good night,
brief
girl.
kingship
I'll see
during
you
the
tomorrow.
revolt. This wasn't just
that
an
about it?
execution, it was a medieval roast, literally. Next, 9 of Doja's starving followers were brought in and offered a special meal, pieces of their roasted master. Pliers were taken out of a fire and used to rip flesh from Doja's body.
Bro,
The
that's to
peasants
eat
were
him.
ordered to take bites of Doja from the area the pliers had cooked and torn away. Imagine
Tell
being
about his-
so hungry you'd eat anything, and then being ordered to eat the guy who had been your biggest hero. Any peasant who refused to eat their boss was cut into pieces on the spot,
Oh, yeah, hit the
showing
fuck,
the
bro.
other peasant rebels that the nobles meant business. Eventually, Doja succumbed to his injuries, and the peasants who ate a piece of their former hero were let go with trauma that probably lasted the rest of their life.
Yeah, chat, they
Oh,
were
and
cooked.
Zapolya? He went on to become the king of Hungary.
Bro just had to... Okay, yeah, this guy's easy. Hey, it's clear you like this video. There's one right here as well. Why don't you watch this one too? Come on, watch it. Press it, bruh.
Yo, they still ain't pressed the
Well, that's
video.
what I'm saying. They ain't pressing it, bro.